Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. Okay, welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis, and I'm laughing because we just did a mess up and are restarting it. We're on episode 58, and we did 58 episodes without any screw-ups on the intro, so that's pretty good. That's a pretty good number. So thanks for coming back. We got Brandy Walker with us today. She's one of our counselors here at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness. She's an awesome therapist, and she came to talk about grief a while back on the podcast, and it was a fantastic episode. We got tons of good feedback. Several clients came in because of the podcast, so hats off to you, Brandy, for doing it. No pressure on this one.
Thank you.
Yeah. So welcome to the podcast. We're going to talk a little bit today about chronic pain. So there are a lot of people that are out there who suffer with chronic pain, who have injuries, who have sickness, who have illness, who have these this pain that just continues to stay with us either all their life or most of their life. And Brandy's worked with that a lot. I've worked with it some, and so we just thought it'd be a great episode to kind of cover. And hopefully for listeners, it can two things. One, if you struggle with chronic pain, we're going to hopefully give you some empathy and some understanding and validation. And then two, if you're a person who supports someone who struggles with chronic pain, we hope to kind of give you some insight and some wisdom and some support too. So that's kind of the goal. So Brandy, tell us, for people who didn't maybe listen to the last podcast, who you are and why you're here. And yeah.
Okay. So I thought about this because the last two times I gave two different pieces of like my story, and I was like, I'm going to condense it and get it right this time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm here. I'm a counselor. I work at Clint Davis Counseling. But my story is a little bit kind of new as a teenager in high school that I wanted to do counseling. And through different events in life, by the time I got to the point that I could go to college, I decided I wasn't going to college. And then through other events in life, I decided it was time to go to college, but I wouldn't listen to anybody talk about anything. So I changed my major multiple times. I tried all kinds of different things. And ultimately, once I got some things figured out, I was like, yep, I'm supposed to be a counselor. And I finally got on the path.
Nice.
And that's why it took me 10 years to do my school career, because I was jumping around from thing to thing and finally honed in and got it knocked out. So
yeah, and I would say that's probably, I hear you say like that's, like a bad thing, but that's really what most people do.
Well, no, not a bad thing. I just think had I gone with my original, what I felt, and not let life circumstance but of course that's
like, you mean you knew you wanted to do counseling, but then you kind of avoided that?
Yes, to a degree.
Gotcha.
Because of other things that had happened in my life. I was like, I'm not listening to anybody else's problems. I can't even deal with my own
Gotcha. That
type
makes
thing.
Sense. Yeah.
And, but of course that's kind of the age I was too. When you're young,
Oh, it's overwhelming.
Absolutely. And so
I still can't believe people listen to me about stuff.
And then, I finally was like, well, I don't know why you're avoiding this. None of these other things have worked. Those are not the path. This is the path.
Yeah.
And you've known it since you were, 14, 15. So just come on.
That's funny.
Get it done.
I was kind of the same way. I mean, I remember being in junior high, high school, and my friends would come to me and ask me like relationship advice. And like they were dating and having sex and doing all kinds of stuff and telling me about it. And at the time I wasn't, doing any of that. And so I'm like giving them advice. And I have no clue what I'm doing, but it was just kind of that whatever. And then I remember taking a psych class, and it was the first time I just nailed something and got an A just with no effort.
Right.
And then I was like, I'm not going to school for like 7 years, though. You know, I'm going to get out, be a rad tech, I'm going to make $35,000 and be super successful and take 3 years of school and be done. You know, and your brain's you're just an idiot. You know, he was a 19, 18, 19, 20-year-old idiot. Yep. So I was in the same boat. I jumped around, but life smacks you, and God takes you where he wants you to be.
Yeah. And, you know, coming here, working at Clint Davis Counseling is like what I had always envisioned what this was supposed to look like. Now, it took a long time to get here.
Yeah.
But
I paid Brandy to say that.
no, it's like so true. You know, I worked in a lot of different settings where I learned a great deal of things, but like this is where you actually get to do the real counseling.
Yeah. What you see in the movies.
Similar, yes.
Yeah, it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Our clients are a lot more amazing than the clients in the movies.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, we love having you, and it's you know, you're one of my favorite people to send people to because everybody on staff, but you know, you particularly with grief and with pain, with those things, like I always know I can send people to you and you're going to knock it out of the park. So
thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's huge. I mean, it's a huge in our field, you know, trusting people, having people come in to see people, wanting to see you, wanting to see somebody else. And you have to say, hey, listen, I know this person's good. Me being able to just text you or text our other therapist and send them somebody without hesitation, man, there's no better feeling in the world. Instead of, for a lot of people listening, right, they go on Psychology Today, they try to find somebody and they're like, who do I trust? Who do I share this stuff with? Who's going to understand me and see me? And they don't know what the letters or and everybody, I mean, that's the crazy part. Somebody was saying that this week, a client was saying something like, therapists need to stop putting I do all these things if they don't. You know, but people will put, I do sex addiction or I do grief or I do whatever, but they have zero training in those things.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of you and I appreciate you being here. Okay. So tell me a little bit about why chronic pain came up and how that plays into what you want to talk about today.
Well, so again, kind of like all the other podcasts I've done, it's a personal type thing that
because you've done two before this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah. Grief and then the living with an alcoholic.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that one was,
Yeah. And then, so this is, another, I just find that I work well with the things I've experienced. Now, I haven't experienced chronic pain personally, but family members.
Yeah.
My mother got many things that cause chronic pain. And then I have a sister-in-law that deals with chronic pain. And so it's kind of our whole family. We work around those issues. And so I've had kind of firsthand experience with supporting and being a part of figuring that out. So my mother was completely healthy, and then things happened, and within a matter of days, completely different person. And so we've been figuring that out for years. And then I started seeing it in my office with different people, and then just kind of thought, this is really an area where people don't even know the kind of support they need.
Mm-hmm.
And just based on what I was learning and what we were figuring out, I started talking to other people about those things, and it's just an area where I feel led to offer support.
Yeah.
And really and truly, there's a lot of things that happen with chronic pain that are very similar to grieving.
Absolutely.
So they're very close in relation.
Yeah.
As far as some of the ways you can work with it.
Yep.
So that's
it's
kind
like
of
a
where
living
my
grief.
interest. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there is living grief, but then I think the pain, the constant pain that keeps you from everything, keeps you in that haze, and we'll talk about that some, but it's it constantly keeps you in a state of living grief, of missing the life you had before you were hurting.
Right.
So I think that's the similarity is, if this wouldn't have happened, or if I wouldn't have done this, or if it's a personal injury, if I'd have not walked that way or worn those shoes or turned left
Right.
or put my pressure on that table, or I'm saying these very specific things that I've worked with, where people were perfectly fine, did something totally normal, got super hurt, and then from then on, had a problem. I had a client who hurt their shoulder, and I was telling you before we got on here, I tweaked my shoulder yesterday, and it's like, and they were, they were out of a thing they loved. They were, nobody understood it. People were like, "Oh, just get over it or stop being, whatever." And that was really stressful, and the pressure, and, it caused a lot of problems for 4 or 5, 6 years, of trying to get over that injury. So it's very difficult. And people, like you said, people don't really understand. There's not a culture of support.
Right.
I think that's the theme. I mean, we're 58 podcasts in, and it's like every one of these, it's so sad how little we as a culture support each other in all these issues.
Right.
It's always like the problem. There's not a culture of support, and it's like, man, we need to do a better job.
Right.
So define chronic pain. What is that? So people, understand if they don't understand.
Okay. So I wrote this down so I'd get it
go
right. Okay. So chronic pain is recurring or ongoing pain that lasts more than 3 months. The pain, like there's no degree of pain you have to be considered chronic pain.
Right. So like on a 3 to 10 scale, it could be 3, but all the time, constant.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Or it could be 10 all the time and constant.
Right.
Or
So
fluctuate.
basically it's persistent or goes away, and every time you do certain things, that pain comes back. But it has to have lasted. It's acute if it goes away and doesn't come back within 3 months. But beyond that, it's that's kind of the definition.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. So if people were thinking about it, chronic pain is that thing that, like, it's not just one injury that hurts for a few months and then it goes away forever. It's the constant, and then you get a little bit of a reprieve, but as soon as you do something, it's back, and then it's nagging you for 3 or 4 more months, and then or you don't ever get a reprieve, or the reprieve's very short. Cool. So what are some of kind of the most normal things we see in chronic pain? Like, what are some of the typical things that people deal with?
So low back pain is like the highest.
Yeah.
But then you have shoulder pain, headaches, cancer, arthritis, fibromyalgia. Those are all like the top numbers of things that qualify for chronic pain. Of course, there's lots of other things, but those are
kind of the major ones.
Yeah, those are the major ones.
Yeah, I know low back pain's a big deal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I tweaked my back, I don't remember when, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I'm literally like couldn't get to the toilet. JC's having to carry me. By the time I get back to the bed, I'm laying there, and I just start crying because I'm just so overwhelmed and frustrated.
Right.
And I have no clue how long it's going to last. I think that's the hard part, right? It's like you get an injury, something happens, and I've never been incapacitated like I was then. And helpless. And I'm in my brain, I'm like, this is a Saturday. I'm not going to be able to go to work Monday. Like, how long am I going to be out? What clients do I have to cancel? What meetings do I have to cancel? What speaking events do I have to cancel?
Right.
And that was gone. Luckily for me, it was like, a little 3-week recovery and chiropractor and massage, and I'm okay. But when that happens and it's 6 months, 3 years,
right,
forever,
yeah,
it starts to be maddening.
Yeah.
What kind of clients have you had, or is there any stories you can give that are specific?
I have a lot of different clients now. I have some that their pain is from surgeries, and while the surgeries helped, they are left in pain.
Yeah. Well, that's a big one that's tough. Because people, I think a lot of the natural people I work with say, do not let anybody cut on you if you can.
Right.
But I've worked with personal injury cases where they're in a lawsuit and they're like, no, go, this hurts, get this thing or get this ablation or do whatever. Right. And it gives it a break for a little bit, but sometimes it can make it way worse.
Right. And then there's the people that have like the degenerative joint disease and bone, just stuff that there's nothing, surgery can't fix it.
Yeah.
Medicine doesn't fix it. It's just the way your body is doing. I actually have several clients that have, and a lot of people have never heard of this. This is a unique one. It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Okay.
And I have multiple families. It's a genetic thing, and it causes it's like your I guess it's the joints. Your joints are so elasticy that over time they stop holding things in place like they're supposed to, and like different types of movement can cause your body to get out of alignment fairly easily. I mean, they're in ongoing pain all the time from just walking, moving, different things. It's been a very interesting one, which I've learned quite a bit about because I've had whole families that have it. And it's, another type of scenario, and this is a more recent one that I've started learning about, is it's called dystonia.
Okay.
And it deals with your muscles and your nerves, but it causes wherever you have it, that part of your body does not work the way it's supposed to. It's like the messages to that part of the body don't signal right. Like when it's in your legs, you end up either walking on your tiptoes, having to walk with a cane, causes balance issues, but it can be in different parts of your body.
Gotcha.
And so that's a newer one that
I've never heard of that.
I'm working with a client that has it.
Yeah. And so what are some of the things that we know we name what some of those things are, chronic pain issues, but what are some of when somebody has lower back pain, when somebody has these issues, how does that affect so let's talk systemically, right? It's an individual, what's that affect?
Well, so like meaning
like their life.
Their life.
Open-ended.
Okay.
Yeah, like how like I want people to understand if they let's say lower back pain or whatever, let's look at it at a micro and then we'll kind of macro it out.
Right. So typically when we're in pain, we that causes us to be tense, feel more stressed, which means we're more irritable, and we want to do whatever is necessary to make that stop. So a lot of times we stop doing certain activities. So it may mean we don't exercise the same, which in turn has its own set of issues. Like with back pain, sometimes that means you can't stand on your feet as long, so maybe you stop cooking. You stop being able to do a lot of day-to-day tasks in the way you used to. And so then that can begin to spiral out of control or feel like it's spiraling out of control.
Absolutely.
And then that piques your stress and causes anxiety, which causes your body to hurt. And so it's like this cycle that begins to happen.
Absolutely. So you got the physical pain that happens, the injury, the focus on that, then the grief you talked about earlier that comes in and goes, oh my gosh, I have to change my life and do things differently.
Right.
Constantly.
Right.
Then I stop doing some of the things that are self-care, let's say, that are, exercising, cooking, engaging, interacting, traveling. And then all of a sudden now my body's starting to get worn out, and then my cortisol goes up and my dopamine and all those things get jacked up. And so then I start feeling depressed or anxious. And then I would say from a Christian perspective, I think people tend to then start either being mad at God or wondering or shaming themselves of like, why do I deserve this? I deserve this.
Sure.
And so then they feel lost and hopeless in that area too.
Absolutely.
And so that's the individual. And then so if that person's in a family or in a marriage or at a business, what happens then?
Well, so then it's an adjustment process. And if the people around you aren't adjusting, then that's going to cause more conflict. And when you're in a family, it means that other people may have to do things that they haven't done before because that person they just are not capable in the same way.
But Brandy, people don't like to change.
No, they don't. No, and a lot of times people don't like to do things that they think another person should be able to do.
Oh, talk to me about that. So so when people have chronic pain, that happens a lot, right?
Sure, because a lot of times it's not outwardly visible. And so
if you cut your leg off, right,
Right.
which people have to do, people have a little more empathy for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if your lower back hurts and you look like you were walking fine yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I think it's just, and when we just get used to the roles that we're in, and we don't want to have to do more a lot of times. And so it's a challenging thing.
Absolutely.
Because you have to be willing to try to understand it and learn about it and see it for what it is, not for what it might look like.
So it sounds like we're talking to the people who are on the outside of the chronic pain, right? So what would you say to them? How can they, if they have somebody in their life who seems to be in chronic pain, who can't get better, who's what they would say is just being lazy, whatever.
Right.
What would you say to them? How do they empathize?
I think you have to remind yourself a lot that you're not in that person's body. And just because you don't physically understand what it feels like doesn't mean it's not real or it's not happening. It requires a lot of empathy. And I think sometimes, I have to remind myself sometimes, because I'll get frustrated over certain situations, and then after I calm down, I'm like, okay, this is just what it is, and this is what we have to do, type thing.
Yeah, it goes back to, do we believe that person's being genuine and sincere in their pain? And I think when we're exhausted and they're exhausted, it's easy to kind of go, well, they can do more.
Right.
Or they're being lazy.
Right. Well, and then you get into, when it's gone on for a really long time, it's not even about believing. It's just you wish it was different. You're tired of obstacles or things, and so you might be getting frustrated just because you wish it was different.
Definitely. Yeah, when Grady had really bad food allergies, my oldest, JC was having to be super limited with their diet and could only feed him certain things. And there was part of me internally, it was like, it's not this bad. This rage of there's no way that's ridiculous. But that was what it was.
Right.
She didn't make it up, he had the food allergies and that was the case. But yeah, you have this desperate feeling when you're exhausted too, when you're on the outside. Maybe it's not like this, maybe it's not as bad. And you feel tricked, or you feel scared that, is there any movement that we can make that makes this easier for everybody?
Right.
And then we start focusing on that instead of the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
What would you say to the person who's in chronic pain? How could they communicate better or more helpful to the people that are helping them?
So I think, it's a journey that they have to go on, and they, more than anyone else, have to adjust, accept, recognize that they're not the same person they were before this happened to them. And that doesn't make them less than, or doesn't change the fact that they can do things. They just have to figure out how to get things accomplished in the best way they can without adding more harm to themselves. And so, I would just say it's you have to learn to have patience with yourself.
Yeah.
And that can be, we're the most critical on ourselves.
Absolutely.
So, it really is a lesson in learning how to care for yourself.
Definitely.
And, I would definitely just encourage people, as much as there are days you feel like giving up, don't. It's about regrouping. It's about looking at it from different perspectives. It's about learning to ask for help, which can be really hard. And admitting that I can no longer do this thing on my own.
Why do you think that's hard?
Because we live in a society where individuality is so important and doing it on your own. We're not like a team society. It's you have to carve out your path. You have to be independent. You have to figure it all out with a smile on your face all the time.
Yeah.
And so when you begin not being able to do that, it's this internal struggle and battle of, who am I now? What does this mean?
Identity shift, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a huge issue. I mean, that's a great point, and that's a huge issue we have just in life in general, where, what is people's identity, and where they find it, and if it's not found in Christ, if it's not found in being enough because you are adopted, right? You are saved, you are righteous, you are all these things, then you do find it in your ability to work, your ability to provide money, your ability to have sex and please your spouse, your ability to, do all the things that are the day-to-day, what we take for granted and forget about. And when those things fall apart, man, if you don't have any foundation, then it's a 1,000 times worse. Is what I see clinically, is that it's hard enough when you have chronic pain in general. But I've seen people who handle it really well because they had a foundation and they have good community and their identity is not in all those things as strongly. I mean, all of us struggle with that.
Right.
Do you feel like that's accurate?
Yes, I think that's true. I definitely think sometimes the individual themselves handles it better than the people around them. When you're talking about that foundation, when they have that foundation, I think that person can begin to adjust and figure things out. But the expectations of all the people, like all the things they used to do, other people don't shift as quickly and easily to that.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think, not obviously there's a spectrum. We always talk about any of this. There's a wide spectrum, but all I can talk about is my experiences. But with my brother Dustin, when he died of brain cancer, or when he was going through brain cancer stuff, he was writing his journal every day. He was praise and worship. He was loving God, and he's 26. I'm like, man, there ain't no way that's my attitude. I mean, I hope to God that would be my attitude, but I don't think it would. And there was a lot of stuff in our family that was difficult to deal with, and people got exhausted, and the ups and downs of remission and not remission, and cancer's back and not back, and all these kind of things. And there's a lot of projection of people's views and opinions of what he could have been doing and they could have been doing, and at the end of the day, you just have no clue.
Right.
And all you can do is learn to set the boundaries that you can set, and say yes to the things you can say yes to, and no, and I think that's a hard tension. When people are suffering, when people are in pain.
Right. And another piece to it is what works one day to ease pain, relieve stress, may not work the next day.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so it's a constant, trying to figure out the balance.
Yeah, that is the maddening part, right? Is like something works for a little while, and then all of a sudden everybody gets adjusted to it.
Right.
They think they have a system and they can relax, and then boom, we got to switch it up, and then everybody's got to switch up with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think care, somebody who's got chronic pain who needs 24-hour care or 12-hour care or whatever.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit, how that tends to be difficult?
Well, that is, it's like having a baby, except this person is an adult, and you have to, there's a different level of, respect, and I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but it's like this person was either your parent or your equal or someone, and so you don't want to, take away their dignity or, or their ability to do certain things. Yet at the same time, sometimes it would be easier if you could, because then you could get things done more quickly. But I think when you're in that position and you're especially if you're the sole caregiver, you have to find your own support. You cannot totally give up everything about your life, even though it's super hard to hang on to those things. But if you give them all up, you have nothing that's giving back to you, so you stay depleted.
Yeah, man, that happens so much too.
It does.
people feel bad about going and exercising and eating right, taking care of themselves and taking a break because their
Right.
loved one's dying or hurting or whatever, and then they just both get miserable.
Right. And that ultimately can cause the person that's caring for the other one to make themselves susceptible to illness.
Oh yeah.
Because we can, as humans, we're capable of a lot, but we can only push so far for so long without breaks.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember when Dustin was getting, really, really sick, and his glioblastoma, so it was in his prefrontal, so he started being real personality-wise, different. And I remember we were out to eat one time, and he had come, and he was just being real obnoxious. He was obnoxious anyway. God bless him. I loved him, in a good way, but it was like not in a good way. And I remember feeling like, oh man, when is this going to be over? So that we don't have to, everybody was just kind of like walking on eggshells. And then I felt horrible for thinking it, but that's the kind of stuff we think. We get exhausted and we're tired, and we just want it. We just want the pain to end, the suffering to end, the change to end,
Yeah.
And some people that gets extended for years and years and years and years.
Yes. Which, this is kind of a segue. I didn't talk about this in the intro, but my grandfather had a stroke that paralyzed him where he could only use one arm.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and my grandmother took care of him for 17 years.
Oof.
And while my mother developed her illness in the midst of all of that, and she continued to do that. But that was another challenging thing because he could not be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was the sole caregiver. My grandmother was the sole caregiver. My mother came in to assist her. And he was so particular that only certain people could stay with him, and my grandmother and mom be able to leave the house. So it was constantly this juggling act. And, by the time towards the end of all of that, my grandmother just broke down and ultimately passed away before he did.
Wow.
And then we had to make other choices. And
That's so hard,
it's
Brandy.
it is. And my mother was an only child, so she was handling it all herself.
Whew.
And
yeah. Yeah.
We supported her the best that we could.
Yeah, but you were the kids.
Right. And we have full-time jobs and
wives.
And couldn't be there in the way that we would have liked to have been able to be there.
Yeah, that's it's such a telling part, right? It's like, it also shows how chronic pain can cause, or injury can cause, like generational trauma. Mm-hmm. And the epigenetics of passing all that stuff down, and then systemically, my mom's supposed to be taking care of me, right? Giving me attention, attachment, attunement, all that stuff as a kid. But instead, she's sick, and she's sick from burning herself out taking care of our grandfather, and then we're sick. We've talked about that before on other episodes, just like our own junk and issues and lens in which we see the world through. And that's what brings us to therapy.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
What makes us come in here is we have to, and if you're listening, and I forget we're doing the podcast sometimes, we just get, the talk's good. But if you're listening to this and this is making sense, or you see these patterns in your own life, that's kind of the point of coming into therapy and dealing with it, is that, and not until you sit down and you can slow down and look at the pieces and see how, most of the time you're just in survival mode. Mm-hmm. Somebody passes away and bam, all of a sudden the grief comes in, and then you have time to process, like, whose fault's what, who's responsible for what, where did I burn myself out and extend myself? I'm mad at them about it. I see this a lot in my own life, but in other people's lives, like, at least in my personality, I extend myself too much on my own. Nobody asked me to do it, but I want to be the helper, and I extend myself too much, and then I'm resentful and frustrated that I burnt myself out and blah, 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 blah. But it's really my bad boundaries. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I see that a lot in people.
Right.
And then you get in therapy and you're like, oh, they do have some responsibility, and I do have a right to be frustrated. However, some of that was on me, and it wasn't asked for. And so therapy allows you to find that space, and I think that's where freedom comes from, is you can forgive and move forward and repent of your own stuff, and instead of holding on to that. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What are some of the, so we're talking about it, but let's be a little specific. So what do we see clinically, diagnoses or whatever in people around, or the people with chronic pain, mental illness?
depression, anxiety, a lot of sleep problems.
God, that's the worst too.
And unfortunately, that battling sometimes addiction, sometimes it turns into addiction, sometimes it's just figuring out how to keep it from turning into addiction when pain medication is what you have to have have any quality of life.
And doctors, I mean, not being a hater, but doctors pass it out like candy. You know, we're getting better.
Right.
But there's a long season where you say, oh, I was fractured my foot. And people are like, here's 20 Loratab, or here's, Oxycontin, or, whatever. And yeah, we have a pandemic of people getting hooked on that stuff and legitimately needing it, legitimately not wanting to be in pain, trying to function, trying to go to work.
And another piece of that I see is they legitimately need it, but their family does not want them to be on pain medicine.
Yeah.
And so they feel guilty for taking something because it does alter who they are.
Yeah.
And,
well, they're altered one way or the other, right?
Right. And then they're struggling with, because a lot of times in those situations, the pain is just the pain medication is just it doesn't alleviate the pain. It just reduces it enough for them to do things.
Right.
And so you take that piece away and then
they can't do anything.
So it's like, okay, do I literally live in isolation and do nothing and be in a level 10 or more pain all the time? Or do I take this pain medication that allows me to get to a 5 and do some things and have some quality of life? But then you have your family or other concerned parties like saying, we don't want you to do that. We don't like it. You shouldn't do,
Yeah, you seem
so
drugged
it's this
up.
war.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that goes with, that tracks us back to grief and in that stage of acceptance of helping people realize, like, no, this is what it is.
Right.
For now.
Right.
And let's be together in this moment, in this season as it is, instead of trying to get back to what it was or push past really quickly and get into what hopefully will be.
Right. And one thing a piece that a lot of people don't know that you can get from counseling is someone to try to help you figure some of that out because when you're on pain management, they're not helping you figure it out. They're just telling you, this is what you can take. If you go over this, we're taking your medicine from you, it's a whole system.
Yep.
I mean, I have lots of clients where we chart out what their pain level is when they're taking medicine, what they've been doing, what can we do when the medication that you're prescribed doesn't last the length of time in between when you can take it, instead of trying to take more or they do lots of creative things to try to make it last. It's like, let's figure out what's going to help your body without abusing it.
Yeah.
And so, whether that's doing different exercises, that a whole lot of these people go to physical therapy and they know some things or can ask for physical therapy again to learn things that help relieve that, or if it's doing shorter intervals of work around the house, or if it's supplementing with an inflammation medication in between. It's like, let's play with this and figure out what can you do to help yourself not do this.
Absolutely.
And so that can be a big thing.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, I think one of the things I was thinking about before we were doing the podcast was, lots of families get stuck in this trap of medication and then addiction and then shame around, taking the medicine. And there's not really, like you said, unless you come into therapy, there's not really a system set up to help you manage all that.
Right.
There's no like, hey, here's a treatment plan around this and we're going to check in. And,
right.
And so you're right. Like people coming in and being able to walk those out with a clinician who's not their family, who's not going to blame them, who's not going to shame them, who's not taking care of them. That's huge.
Right.
Because, yeah, you can sit down with your mom or your dad or your husband or your wife or your sister or your brother, whoever, and try to do this same thing. But then there's a selfish negotiation that's going on where it's like, it's not really for you.
Yeah.
You're withholding, they're withholding, they're asking for too much, you're asking for too much. And so to be able to do that in here is a huge space for people, so they can kind of get a clear line on, okay, what's the truth.
And I have had it work out where some people see I didn't have to take that. Like when they start charting it out, they're like, I don't have to have this one at this time. I really can just take ibuprofen or Tylenol and it'll get me through to, like, we figure out some things that keep them from having to be medicated all the time.
Yeah.
And then there have been some situations where there's nothing that helps. And so we figure out how do we deal with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And then they're able to, I've worked with a couple of times where it's like, my kid's baseball thing is this, or I want to be fully present for this, and I don't want to be on drugs, and I don't want to feel like loopy. And so, yeah, you gotta compromise and figure out like, okay, I'm going to be in this much pain for a while, and then I'll take it, but then I get to be present for this event, and all that's just so hard, and exhausting, on everybody.
And then another piece that I just want to interject is sometimes you're not on pain medicine, but you're on medication that causes you to have brain fog or just slower decision-making capabilities. And for whatever reason, that's the side effects of the medicine that treats. Like for arthritis, you're not always on pain medicine, but you're on these high-level inflammatory type of drugs, and they mess with you.
Yeah, like rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah. I have several clients with that, and the timing of how to get all that stuff going right and not swollen, and it messes you up. And so then it's learning how to work with that person when they're in that state of mind. And oddly enough, with those illnesses, with things like rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, weather plays a big part. So not only does the medication, but cold fronts and storms play with it, like exacerbates the brain fog and that stuff. So it's like learning them in the condition that they're in, so okay, today's not going to be a good thinking day for them, so we're not going to ask them these hard questions today or have them make decisions about all these types of things today. Yeah, I think that really puts in and there's so many people that are in this category. Like, is it more people than not? I don't even know.
Probably.
Yeah, probably more people than not are in a state of chronic pain or in pain. And I think that's such a spiritual conversation around, like, we tend to, and at least I know I do, tend to want the fireworks show, the event, the meaning, the magic of life. And I think what's so hard about any of this stuff, and this could apply to addiction, this can apply to depression, this can apply to any really mental health issue, is that we're so selfish in the sense that, like, you're taking away from me living out my biggest dream now. And I get it. There's grief and there's suffering in that, and I'm not saying there's not. But at the end of the day, that's kind of where our hope is in heaven. Is that no matter what we do now, it's not going to be heaven. We're to bring as much of the kingdom of God to earth now as possible. But the reality is like, we're in the not yet. And so learning to, like, be in the moment with people and for it to be good enough, and learning to find these spaces in which, like, okay, we hung out, we had time together, we laughed, and it lasted 15 minutes good and then another hour's bad, but that was enough. Instead of, I go in with these expectations of, I want 45 hours that are good. I'm going to get 1 hour and it's going to be great. And then you get 15 minutes and it's now you're depressed and anxious and miserable because it wasn't what you expected.
Right.
And so teaching people and walking people in therapy through how to hold space, I think is so vital and important.
Right. And I think some of that comes, we live in a society that says you have to be on all the time. You have to be this. And so I think it's
producing.
Right. And I think you have to remind yourself that really isn't real.
Yeah. It's good.
But I think it's because it surrounds us on a regular basis. It's challenging to make sure you are checking yourself for, okay, wait a minute. nobody ever said this person was supposed to do all of this.
Right.
They were doing it, and now they can't. So let me have some grace for them.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great point. I mean, and social media and, television and movies and film would say all of these things, are what you can achieve and attain and get. Mm-hmm. And when people are doing everything we want them to do and then all of a sudden that stops, we get real selfish real quick. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, they're both true. If you're helping someone with chronic pain, it is all the things we said before are still true. It is exhausting. It is overwhelming. It is taking away from your life. It does drain you and suck you and all of those things. And at the same time, we have to be able to find space where that is enough, mm-hmm. and where they didn't want this either. Mm-hmm. They didn't choose to hurt their back.
Right. And I often try to, not always in the counseling room, but just in general, when people are in that space of caring for someone else and feeling frustrated, there's always a point where I try to remind them, because this is something that I've just learned for myself, is that the end result is you're not going to look back and say, dang, I wasted all that time taking care of someone. Right. That is not what you're going to think and say. You're going to be like, gosh, I'm so glad I got to spend every moment doing everything I can. So it's like you got to look at the long picture, not the moment. Like, yeah, this stinks right now, but one day I'm going to be able to say I did everything I could, mm-hmm. and you're going to be able to walk away from situations with less regret.
Yeah, definitely.
Or no regret.
Well, and I think that, that's such a fine line to walk, though, because that's how people tend to burn themselves out as well.
Right.
As they go, I don't want to have any regrets, so I'm going to kill myself.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yes.
And
yes.
So we're talking to two different people.
Yes. So you do have, yes, you still have to care for yourself. That's huge.
Yeah.
But I think when you're in that mindset of not knowing whether you can do it anymore, that's sometimes the piece that says, yes, you can, mm-hmm. as long as you're doing this for you.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to leave that part out. It's very important.
I'm just saying, it's interesting, even as we talk about it, you have to kind of, I think people flow through both. It's so nuanced. It's not black and white, mm-hmm. And you find yourself in this moment of like, okay, I got my head around it one day, I'm feeling good. And I think that's what we're saying is you got to take it moment to moment, day to day.
Right.
Maybe tomorrow will be a bad day, and the most that anybody can do is 2 steps. We'll do 2 steps. Don't get into I did 5 steps yesterday and I should have been doing 20 steps, and all of that is just going to drive you crazy. Mm-hmm. And don't look at other people and say, well, they're doing this, and the measurement game is what burns us out the most. I feel like mm-hmm. it's comparison and all those things.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a mess.
It is.
What are some ways, other than the tracking and stuff? What are some ways that you can help people? What can people get help with around this kind of stuff?
I think helping them make a realistic to-do list, mm-hmm. Figuring out what are the tasks that I do that strain my body the most.
Yeah.
And figuring out that you can't do all of those tasks in one day, sometimes not even in 1 week. Like figuring out how your pain affects you and how you can break it down to still feel like you are doing things mm-hmm. that you need to be doing. Helping them accept that it's not ever going to look the way it used to look.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Encouraging people to continue to make plans. A lot of people get in this thing where they don't want to make plans because they don't know how they're going to feel that day.
Yeah, they don't dream anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, but the people who really care about you are going to understand when you say, I can't do it today. Mm-hmm. But don't cut off your connections for fear that you may have to cancel sometimes.
That's right.
Have conversations with people about that so that it doesn't
That's hard,
affect
Brandy.
friendship. I know it is. Because that means you have to admit something's wrong.
Yep.
And that you're working it out, and somebody may not fully understand.
Mm-hmm. Which goes back to being centered in who you are, so that, you know, the external things like other people's opinions of your truth don't determine your truth. Mm-hmm. And that's hard too. It takes a lot of work.
Right. Just helping people get organized, calendaring things, remembering things. So, you know, that's another piece. A lot of the medication creates forgetfulness. Mm-hmm. So figuring out what's the best way, you know, to set reminders. I mean, I have people, we're in my office and we're like, let's get your phone out. We're going to set them right now. Because if you don't do it now, you're going to forget, you know, or your assignment this week is to go get this calendar, and then we're going to write on it during this session. Like,
very practical. Yep.
Yes. But it's like sometimes you're not able to think through all those pieces on your own because your mind is so cloudy from the things that you're having to do to care for yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I've worked with, I got a couple right now that, yeah, they're like, wait, when was our session? And, you know, just remembering appointments and who said what and what we talked about last time. And, you know, and then they feel shame, you know, because they had a working brain.
Right.
You know, their back hurts or their knees hurt or their ankle hurts or their fibromyalgia is flared up or whatever. And now not only does that hurt, but now they can't think and they can't remember. And you know, that seemingly has nothing to do, quote unquote, with the, you know, the pain, but it all overlaps.
Right. And in the counseling rooms, we get the opportunity to validate and say, you know, yeah, I hear what you're going through and that's terrible. And I'm sorry. And no, you're not crazy. This is real.
Right.
And, you know.
No, you don't need to just get over it.
Right. Yes. You know, because, and you can get in your own head so easily and convince yourself I've made this worse than it is. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Let's back up and let's look at things. You know, let's look at the facts.
Yeah.
What's really happening.
Yeah. Help people see, like, I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, whose voice is that? You know, whose negative voice is that when you're minimizing and beating yourself up? And they're like, I've never thought of that. You know, and it's like, yeah, it's not yours. It's not God's. Somebody's, you know, said something to you at one point about suck it up or you're being dramatic or that's too much. And again, just to tie this in, before the injury or the chronic pain, we have our own trauma and story and shame and stuff that's already unhealthy.
Right. And
so that just blows everything out of the water.
Right. So you mentioned in trauma throws another thing that I just thought of. So there are links to people that experience trauma having chronic issues happen in their body.
Absolutely.
And so that's another piece of counseling is let's work on the trauma. It may not be able to reverse what's done, but maybe we can help heal the brain so that different messages are being put out to your body. Mm-hmm. You know? That piece.
Absolutely, yeah, because people are probably listening to podcasts, hear me say this 1,000 times, right? But our beliefs shape our thoughts and feelings, which shape our actions. And actions can be symptoms, like physical sensations, body aches, pain, right? Well, when we're thinking negatively, it really is, the way you think really does affect your physical, you know, body. And that's going to be shaped by what do you believe about God, yourself, and other people. You know, really those three things. And so, yeah, we can help people to tie all that in and rewrite narratives to where, you know, when they look in the mirror and they get up in the morning or when they have to do something, that their mentality starts to shape the way their body says, okay, I don't need to produce cortisol. I don't need to produce this much dopamine. I don't need to produce this sort of thing. I need to produce serotonin. I need, I feel better, you know. Oh, now I can go meditate. Right. Oh, and then that releases oxytocin, and then I'm able to take a walk. And instead of building, you know, a house of pain, we're building this house of peace. You know, we're able to kind of walk people through, but you're going to build something one way or the other, right? Nothing's neutral. Right. And I think that's what we can help people see is like, what in their lives do they need to start building that's helpful, and who needs to be out of their life. You know, what boundaries they need to set with people that are just don't understand, and they're not going to be empathetic, and that causes stress and strain and makes the pain worse, and down the spiral they go.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which, sadly, I mean, I was thinking the whole time we're talking, like, what space the church has for this, and how can the church, we do things for widows, and we do things for orphans, and we do things, we have these little deacons meetings and all this stuff, but it's like, how could we check on the people that have chronic pain that need extra support? So anyway, I don't have an answer, but
right.
There should be a group.
Right. And just like, I think knowing they're not alone is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that we just find comfort in knowing that we're not the only one going through something. So like connecting with other people that may not be dealing with the same issue, but where you can talk about it and not feel crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hate to use that word, but that's what people feel.
No, absolutely. No, people do feel crazy, and people tell them they're crazy, and it's all in your head. It's all in your head, and listen, it is in your head. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the thing. I read this thing the other day. It was good, but it was like, people say it's all in your head, and it's like, that's literally where it's at. It's in your mind. That doesn't make it not painful.
Right.
So if somebody's in a state where they're hurting all the time, but it's a somatiform issue where it's like, I'm thinking about it too much and now I'm hurting physically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like telling them it's in their head and just to not think about it's not going to be very helpful.
Right.
Maybe think about why is it that they're so stressed or overwhelmed, that they're thinking so many negative things that's turning into physical manifestations.
Mm-hmm. Right, which is another thing we get to do is teach them how to, give them an arsenal of coping techniques so that they can shift their focus, they can redirect their thoughts, they can do all the things they need to do to help what they're thinking about and how their body feels. Just breathing, right?
I remember being an early counselor thinking the breathing thing was so cheesy. And the more I've done this, the more it's one of my favorite things to do with people.
Yeah.
There was somebody yesterday that was stressing out. I was like, dude, you're breathing like this while we're talking. Stop, stop for a second and.
Right. Yeah.
Breathe, and people in pain, their lung capacity is super short and small and tight, and they don't get oxytocin. And we got to learn to do those things. But man, in our Western world, we're so outside of our bodies too. That's the other problem. We don't, when I ask people, like, when they'll say they're sad or whatever, and I'm like, okay, where do you feel that? They look at you like you have four heads.
Right.
Well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, just stop for a second and pay attention to your body. Where do you feel that sadness or that grief or that anger? And it's in my throat, or it's in the back of my head, or it's right here in my forehead, or it's in my gut.
Right.
But if we're in chronic pain, it's so acute, we lose all that. And so, those tools really help people to be able to calm down, and that really does help with the pain.
It does.
The physical pain, anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. Excuse me. Well, any other thoughts, comments?
Actually, that piece you were just speaking of, where we carry it in our body, I actually have multiple clients that we're doing EMDR, and they are becoming much more aware of when they're stressed out. They're cluing into where is it happening in my body and how is that affecting? Because one of the people I'm doing EMDR with has chronic pain.
Right.
So she's recognizing when she's stressed, where it's triggering in her body.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about that and we're focusing on it. And I had another client this week, just say, after we did EMDR last week, I had this and this and with pain, and that wasn't even the area that she had identified as feeling it in her body. And then when we did it again this week, same area. So I'm like, okay, this is the area.
Right.
And so I think that is an important piece, because relieving that, like you just said, it doesn't take away all the other elements of the pain. But if you can keep that, if you can work with the areas you can find release in, then that's going to help your overall body.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's the goal. It's not, you're not going to get rid of the pain, but it's how can I, in the control that I have, reduce as much as I can. And I think that's where people will start to find peace in their pain, is that they feel some semblance of control.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because in the beginning, that chronic pain is just there. It's overwhelming. It overwhelms the senses. It overwhelms your systems, your family systems, your work systems. And so when people get in a spot where it's manageable, it's not that it's over.
Right.
It's not that it's not going to hurt. It's not that it's not toxic and horrible, but it's manageable.
Right.
You're like, okay, I got this. It's going to suck, and there are going to be days where it's really hard, but it's manageable.
And I think that's important because I think it takes a long time to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because there's so many pieces you have to figure out. First, you have to get the diagnosis, find the right doctors that treat it, find the right medication regimen. Then you have to start figuring out your own body. And so it can take a long time before you get to that place, which can be defeating.
Well, yeah, because you're stacking things on top of each other. It's not
Right.
now just the injury or the pain.
Right.
It's all the systemic shame and brokenness and mental struggles that get dumped on top of that when you're 4 years in or 5 years in, you finally figure it out.
Right.
Now you got to deal with all the extra crap that,
Right.
you know, the society put on you that wasn't supposed to put on you. And so that's what I would remind people as you're helping people, is to, you know, do no harm.
Yeah.
You know, yes, you can have boundaries, and yes, you can be frustrated, but go to therapy yourself. If you're helping somebody who's in chronic pain and you're burnt out and frustrated with them, go to coffee with somebody. Go, you know, do what you have to do and check in with somebody and work on yourself so you can keep helping somebody else. Because lots of times people legitimately are just doing the best they can, and there really isn't anything else they can do.
Right. Right.
You know, whether that's a mental illness or whether that's a physical pain or whatever. Yes, it would be nice if they could do something else, but in maybe a degree or two they could. But in the way that you think that would be relieving to you, that huge degree that would let you off the hook, that's probably not possible, or they would be doing it. Because trust me, they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to put people out. They don't want to, you know, they don't want the malingering and all that stuff going on. And then you flip it and go, well, yeah, but it is really hard, because I'm playing devil's advocate here, for the person who's like, yeah, but I'm here sacrificing. I'm not sleeping. I do have all the boundaries. I am taking care of myself, and they're still smoking. Or they're still drinking. Or they're still overdoing it every day, and then I got to pay for it. What would you say to that?
Oh, well, okay, now that's hard.
But that's a reality. I mean, we see that in our office a lot. Like, all this sounds great, Clint and Brandy, but like...
But that's that piece of control you don't have.
Yeah.
That we all struggle with. Because we think if you would just do this, it would change it all. I think it's just... Sometimes it's just recognizing another person maybe isn't going to do it the way we want them to. And what we would do or what we think is best, we can't make somebody else see that.
Yeah. So then do we have to like double down on our boundaries? Do we double down on our self-care?
It's situational.
Do we bail completely?
It's going to depend on the situation.
Yeah.
And if that situation is bringing harm to your life, you do have to evaluate and reevaluate and figure out how can I be a part of this without it hurting me.
Yeah.
In those ways.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say it's such a fine balance because also as Christians we're called to suffer and carry burdens and bear each other's, you know, wounds and all these kind of things, and yet there is a degree in which that's not the case. You're right.
Right.
I think sometimes we hear that and go, oh, well, then I have to burn myself out and die for this person at every turn.
Right. No.
And that's not actually what Jesus did. You know, he went to the cross for sure for all of us, but he went in a very specific time at a specific point for a specific purpose. There are many opportunities where he slipped out the back and did not go to the cross. You know, the Romans came for him, or the Jews came for him, and he was like, yeah, it's not my time yet. I think we got to find that balance in our own lives as Christians. Like, okay, yes, I'm going to sacrifice and I'm going to serve and I'm going to hurt with you, but it's got to be best for me and you at the same time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think a key point is coming from it out of love, not obligation.
That's good.
So then you have to do work on yourself to get to that place.
Yeah.
Because then it's not the same burden to you.
Man, that's so good. And, that's that authentic living, right? Not being passive aggressive and not being aggressive and domineering. Yeah. Finding that middle ground of like, before I go say yes to this, am I saying yes from a pure heart or as pure as I can get to a heart? Have I prayed about it? Have I sought counsel about it? Have I used my supports? So yeah, then when I say yes to it, I'm not resentful and all bent up after doing it. I'm not like, okay, I'm going to help this one time and that's going to get me what I want, and then you do and they don't appreciate it and now you're mad.
Right.
Or, you know what? I don't want the stress of it, so I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to help and I'm going to tell them what to do and they're going to take the medicine, they're going to do this thing, and then boom, that blows up. It's going in being like, okay, I know who I am. I know who they are. We're going to do the best we can in this situation with very little expectation, and whatever comes of it's going to be enough.
Right.
And then we'll do that the next time and the next time. I'm not saying that's easy, right? That's the ideal.
No, I'm just sitting here thinking it's so relational, because if you don't have a good relationship with that person, but they're your parent or they're someone who raised you or they're your spouse, and
yeah, they didn't take care of you their whole life,
right?
And now you're having
I think there's a lot of pieces to this, and it's not always going to work out as easily as like what we're saying.
No, it's not black and white.
It would be ideal that we could all be able to come from a place of love, but it's not always going to be that way because every relationship isn't that way.
Yeah. But I think the control you have is you get to choose if you're going to be in that relationship authentically or not.
Yeah, sure.
And you'll screw it up like we all do. And we all make mistakes and we all go oscillate between those two passive aggressive and aggressive modes of relationship, whatever it is. But I think stopping to look at ourselves and look at our own hearts and look at our own agendas for why we're helping and why we're serving and why we're doing things is super important. And same thing if you're in chronic pain, like you got to think that how difficult it is for the people around you to help you, and not be the complete victim, although you are suffering and a victim. And also realize like, this is not as easy as it is. And so I gotta find where I can not just fall at everybody's, help, but I can do what I can do. And so, yeah, if they're helping me and they're saying cigarettes are probably killing me and that's stressful and emotional and overwhelming to see, I might want to figure out how to get some nicotine gum. And, there's these things that people have to take responsibility for.
Sure.
And I get it. They're in their pain and they're suffering. And so they want that little thing that's control or little relief or whatever. But if it's at the cost of everybody around them, it's a messy thing, this chronic pain, Brandy.
It is. It is, because it doesn't just affect one person.
No, it's very systemic.
I mean, the same could be said with certain chronic illnesses.
100%, yeah.
I mean, your body may not be in pain, but you are not able to do certain things or should not be doing certain things for your care to keep that illness in check. And, when it comes to that, sometimes we're just not very disciplined people.
Oh, absolutely.
And we don't want to do those things.
Definitely. Or we just haven't worked out the deep comfortableness with ourselves and emotionally and to be able to. I know there's been times where I've been sick and I'm the worst because JC jokes like I don't get man colds. Like and if I'm laying down, I'm dying. And that's not a good thing. That's not a pat on my back. I'm just so stubborn and I feel so guilty about being sick that I'll be like, oh, I'm fine, and my back's hurting and I'm like, but that's not good for me either. Then I'm not letting her take care of me. Then I'm overdoing it and then I end up getting sick and falling apart and then she's got to take more care of me. So it's this fine balance of like, okay, how do I trust her that when she says go lay down, I've got this, that's okay, and not feel guilty about being sick or being hurt. But man, it's crazy, all those emotions that come up for us when we get sick or we get hurt or other people have to help us. There's this weird tension that comes up. And I think every experience that we have with that is an opportunity to bring it to therapy and to go, hey, when I just had the flu and I found myself like not wanting anybody to help me or feeling guilty or asking everybody to help me way too much or whatever the situation, however you work it out. But like those are things, they're not nothing. They're nuggets of attachment and attunement and getting our needs met and deep parental issues that are going to play out if we don't deal with them.
Yep.
Well, I think we covered it really well. What you think?
I think so.
You got anything in your notes that you want that we didn't cover? I was looking at my questions. I think we nailed it without me having to ask them.
I think the only piece I would add is, like, based on what I see in my office and what I've experienced in life, is once someone has, and I don't want to say this to like dishearten anyone, but it's kind of like once you have chronic pain, you're eventually going to have something else. Mm-hmm. It's like it not grows, but it doesn't limit itself mm-hmm. to just that being the only thing.
Right.
Now, I'm sure there are cases where, yes, that pain is just
Morphs.
that pain. Yes, but like with the arthritis and fibromyalgia and those are the two that pop in my mind. Those create, seems that lots of other things, because those are autoimmune. Let me say that. Autoimmune stuff, once you have one thing, it seems to grow into other autoimmune things.
For sure. So
it's like being prepared for, this may not be the end of what's going to happen to my body.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that means, getting a good supportive care ahead of time, getting good doctors. Mm-hmm. Now, I would say that I would recommend too, if you're out there and you don't feel like you're taken care of, switch your doctor.
Right.
Find somebody else. Find somebody who's understands, trauma informed, can understand all of these pieces. And that's one of the reasons we do what we're doing here with the integrative wellness stuff is, you go to a doctor and you have this one problem and they just treat that problem mm-hmm. and they don't prepare you for what's going to come out of it. You mm-hmm. have a miscarriage and the doctor's like, okay, we'll do this. But they're not like, by the way, you're going to have some PTSD-like symptoms. You're going to have some trauma. The next time you have a period, you might get really upset. Like, they don't do that. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to advocate for ourselves. And I think, at least here, we have that system in which we have doctors that we refer to that do look at it holistically and that will look at your pain. Chiropractors who will work with you and go, like Jenna, and, hey, your shoulder's hurting, but you're also talking about how anxious you are and how nervous you are, mm-hmm. and that's going to make your shoulder pain worse. And so we need to work on breathing, and you need to go see Brandy. And, mm-hmm. there's that overlap that we have to do in the medical field. So, yeah, it's a great point that if you're out there with one thing, don't allow people to keep you in that box. Mm-hmm. Find people who will see you as a whole person, mind, body, and spirit, and who will refer you to other people. And if you're a professional and you're listening to this and you're like, yes, I wish I had that, like, call us, email us, whatever. Let's find people in your area. But I challenge you to, like, pursue that. And I know we're all busy and we all have clients, but man, we can do such a better job of seeing people as whole people and having a system in our city and in our town where people get referred. And so everybody's working, and that reduces the pain and the suffering of everybody around. So I think that was a great point. Good stuff.
Okay.
Appreciate you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for letting me come.
Absolutely. If you're still listening to us, thanks for listening, and we love you guys, and we just want to continue to put out good content. So if you have any podcast you'd like to hear, feel free to email us. Several people have done that the last couple of weeks at clintdaviscounseling@gmail.com. Or if you see us posted online, if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, please share the videos. Tag us, comment, let us know you're liking it, watching it. Go to our YouTube page and subscribe. Write a review on iTunes. All of those things can help us so much to put better content out. And I'm going to have some more stuff coming out on Patreon at some point whenever I get my life together. But we appreciate you guys, and God bless, and see you next time.